Big budget movies. They look great, but why? Could it be the big expensive cameras they use? Yeah, probably, but a lot of it also has to do with color grading, which is something anyone can do. Yeah, even you. So I'm going to show you how you can do color grading. Hi, welcome to Let's Create Something. Today we're going to be talking about color grading. I'm going to show you how to do it. Now, it is pretty simple how to do it. However, I will say you're going to need software to do it. That's just how it is. You're going to need software. And you know, the software that I use, a lot of people use, is Adobe Premiere Pro. So here we go. All right, as you can see here, we have Adobe Premiere Pro open, and I got a scene going, I got stuff. So at this point, you're gonna wanna add color grading. Now, what you're gonna wanna do is open your Lumetri color tab. Now, I have it right here, but if you don't see it, because it probably won't be open, you just go to Window, and you click this right here. Now, it'll pop up over on this side, but I always just drag it over here because it's just a lot easier. Now, when you click on this, let me close it all. You can change everything on each individual scene. Let me open this so you can see. Say it's not clicked, you can't do anything, but when you click on a scene, you can change stuff. Now you can go and you can change stuff, on each scene. However, I wouldn't recommend doing that because you have to do that for every single one. So I would recommend going down here and doing an adjustment layer, clicking OK, and dragging that on top, and then doing it on the adjustment layer. That way you can just carry all the way across the scene so you're not just stuck with it here and then you have to do it again here and again and again and again. It's annoying. It's just a better way to do it. So create an adjustment layer, and now as you can see, there are 5 tabs. Now, if you don't want to do anything, there are presets. Presets you can just use right away. So if I go to creative, you can see right here, this is all set presets that you can use. You can scroll through them right here by clicking this, and as you can see, most of these are intense. Like, I'll click on it and it'll go over here. They're pretty intense. However, you can right here control the intensity. You can bring it down, and in theory will do it. Oh, it did do it. Okay, it's just hard to see, but yeah, so you can bring up the intensity, you can lower the intensity. It just most of these are always super intense, so if I do use these, which I rarely do, I always bring down the intensity. And if you want to bring anything, side note, on any of these settings, just double click it and it goes back to the origin. Say, all right, put it back, double click it, goes back to the origin. But yeah, you can scroll through these, and there's a bunch, so you might find one that's good. Like this one looks okay, so put that, but it's a little too faded, so I'll bring it down. It still looks kind of faded. But anyways, so you can go through all these, if you just want to be, kind of lazy, you just want to do it quickly, or if you find one that you like, you can just keep using it. However, I usually don't do that. I usually have none, so let me put this back. When I start this, when I do it just from scratch, I guess, I always start with Vignette, and that, Vignette adds the darkness around the corners. Just because I like to do that first, because I want to see how the Vignette's going to, affect everything, and I always put a Vignette on, so might as well just do it first. So you can see this controls the Vignette, and you can do the opposite too. You can go with a light, kind of faded look, but I always put the Vignette, and then you can change the midpoint. You also deal with the feathering, so you don't want to do that, so you want to bring it about, something that looks like that. And you can play around with this. All of this is all just playing around with it, getting, what you like. And so after that, I'll go to basic correction, and like the thing says, it's basic. So you can control the exposure, of it with this, since it's already, like, if I go back, put the 0, it's already pretty, blown out with all like the white, because I'm in the snow. So I'll probably just lower this if I was going to do the scene. There's contrast. I don't really want to do contrast because, again, the white's already too crazy bright. So I'll probably lower the contrast. And highlights, again, normally I up the highlights, but for here, you don't want to do that because, again, it's widening it out, so I'll probably lower that. Shadows, you control the darkness of the shadows, which is cool. So if you go over here, it gets really contrasty, but if you go the other way, it lightens it all up, which I use a lot, brightening the shadows. You control the whites, which is interesting. Like, I can bring the whites darker so they're not as bright. See, look how nice that looks. But I wouldn't bring it all the way down because, added note, when you play with this, it adds a little bit of grain to your footage. So I wouldn't go too crazy. If you notice, I keep them kind of, close to the middle, but I would bring it down just a little bit. And the blacks, they're fine. And saturation, I'll leave that alone. Now, there is changing the overall color or tone of it. You can do this the easy way. This is the easiest way right here, where you just drag it so you can make it look like an old film if I go that way, or I can make it bluer to make it look really cold, or it could be movie-like. Movies tend to use greens and blues, so if you made a little bit of green to it, it just gives it that film look. You can go crazy, but it looks weird if you do that. You can also go red. I tend not to go red because it just kind of looks unnatural. But yeah, this is a basic. Again, this is just basic. I sometimes use this color stuff if I'm going quickly, but mostly I'll use other color things, which I'll show you in a little bit. So let's close this and go back to creative. Now, one thing I always add to get that film look is right here, as it says, that faded film, which is like that film fade. So if I go all the way up, you can see, look how like faded this is right here. I usually don't go too crazy, but I do add some fade because it does make it look like a film, which looks really good. This will sharpen, you know, sometimes I will if the, you know, it's not completely in focus, but I don't go too crazy because if you go crazy, it starts to look weird and it gets very grainy. So maybe I'll use a little bit, but in this case, the shot's good enough to be 0. Vibrance, it just plays with the color. Again, I don't really mess with that. And saturation, again, messes with the color. I don't really change that because it adds grain. Here's where you can start playing around with the color. Now you mostly use, I like to use these. I like to use the shadow tint specifically because you can click on it. And so like you can see how it's changing the color. So let's say I wanted to have, you know, like a little olderly film look. So I'll go in and make it kind of like orangey in the shadows. And now you can see this little slider. And when you only have one clicked, you can go, like say I can take it away and then I can add the intensity. However, if you have both clicked, it plays, see how it says tint balance? It plays between the balance of both. So right now it's only adding and taking away the shadow tint because I didn't add this tint to it. So if I go and add this tint, like I'll do right now, let's say I wanted it to be, you know, maybe on the bluer side to emphasize the coldness. Or I'll make it radical so you can see the difference. So if I go crazy, you can see if I go this way, you know, the yellow gets more saturated, but if I go back the other way, the blue gets more saturated. So this is just really playing a balance between the two. So if I'm gonna do this, I usually only do one, and you can go back, you just double click and it goes back to 0. So I usually will do like tint the shadows, that's what I do a lot. And then I can control the intensity of it right here. Now, if we close creative and go to curves, this is again controlling the colors, you know, the saturation and all that, and you can control it a lot. You control all the colors at once with this. So it controls like the lightness of it. Double click it to make it go back to normal, or you can control just the reds. So if you don't want it to have any reds in it, you control that. Again, double clicking, you have to go back. Same with the greens. I can take away the green so it becomes really red, or I can add green so it becomes green. Same thing with the blue. I really don't mess with this too much because it's like an overarching, you know, kind of color thing. And like I said, you can change the colors in so many different ways. I just happen to not use this too much. Sometimes I do. I never really use the hue saturation. I mean, you can take it away and add it. And then you can do it with specific colors, like just the red. And you can go, look, you can completely customize this by putting little tabs everywhere. But I tend not to do that. I tend not to mess with this too much. I do use the next tab, which is the color wheels. Now the color wheels is kind of the same thing. You control what tone is in the shadows, what tone is in the midtones, what tone is in the highlights. And this just adds the overall intensity of the highlights. So this I use a lot. For instance, if I want to make like a crazy look, like I'll go back and get rid of what I did here so you can't see that. I go back, color wheels. So let's say I want to do something crazy, like I want the shadows to be like really red for some reason, and I want the highlights to be orange. I want it to have that kind of like polarized look. So you can play with this, you can make it less intense, like that's like really intense. It's a little too intense. And you can also play with the darkness of the shadows, or the lightness of the shadows, which you can see adds to fade. See, the darker it gets, the more contrast, the more crisp it looks, the less it gets more faded as the shadows get brighter. So maybe I want it a little bit faded, a little more intense red. So that's a pretty good look. I mean, it looks old and aged. May not fit with this, but it's good for this example. And like I said, it'll carry through. See, now that I have this adjustment layer over both, I don't have to go and do the same thing again because it's already on there. So it's really nice. And this is pretty much it. This is color grading. It's all you do. You can get steps like the things you like, but I mean, I play around with it all the time. It's all about playing around. Like I said, if you want to do movie stuff, you know, greens, blues, a lot of fade, a lot of contrast, bigger vignette. But most likely when you start color grading, you'll start playing around with all of these settings like I showed you. There's just a lot of settings that all kind of do the same thing, but just slightly different. So you're gonna end up playing around and finding your own, you know, what you like, and making your own presets. You can customize and make your own. So you'll probably end up doing that. But yeah, color grading is pretty easy. The hard part is just getting, you know, this software to, you know, afford it or get it. So, but yeah, that's pretty much color grading. And there you go, that's pretty much all you need to know. And like I said, color grading is really easy to do. It's just getting the software is the hard part. Getting the money or getting the software in general is that's just the hard part. Unless, you know, you have a lot of money, then nothing's hard for you. So yeah, if you do have access to the program, I highly recommend you use color grading because it's so easy and it makes such a big difference. You know, along with using, you know, like I said in my previous video, setting your camera correctly, it really makes things great. So there you go. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. If you have time, please check out my other channel, Beast Buff. And yeah, if you have the opportunity to color grade because it makes a big difference.